So we're now going to talk a little bit about DNS and custom domains. The purpose of this section is if you actually want to deploy to example.com rather than example.herokuapp.com, you're going to need to register a domain and then configure Heroku and your domain registrar to point to each other. And this kind of shows you how to do that for at least one pair of examples. Before we go into that, let's talk about DNS a little bit. So what is DNS? DNS is the system which actually turns a name like wikipedia.org into a set of IP addresses, or rather a single IP address. And this is kind of the diagram of how this works. In general, DNS is very aggressively cached. First, your web browser looks locally, then it looks to your operating system, then it looks to your ISP, your internet service provider, like a Comcast, for example, if you're in the US. And then if it can't find any of these places, it then pushes it out and does a recursive DNS search. And this is what that recursive search looks like. The main point behind DNS is that it is in some sense a layer on top of the raw IP addresses, and you can just take that raw IP address, which you can find via ping, and just type that into a browser and it will work. But the thing is that first, we don't actually memorize these as easily as we do just normal names like stanford.edu, and second, these are subject to change. Stanford.edu will always work, but Stanford might change the actual IPs that are behind Stanford.edu. So this is kind of the very, very first layer of understanding of the DNS system. There's much more that can be done on this. It's really like a whole class. There's some reasonable tutorials and stuff that we linked in the on the class website, like videos and so on. But the main thing to keep in mind is, even though DNS is a distributed database, the main thing that is centralized is that to write new domain names into the database is something where you have to go and work with the registrar, and you have to pay for that at the current time. There are people who are working on decentralizing DNS, but until that happens, we need to pay to get a domain name, and that takes us to our next step.